I never thought my life would fall apart because of something as small and harmless looking as a blinking location dot on a digital map, but sometimes the smallest things carry the loudest truths. My name is Ethan Carter, I'm 32, a software developer from Denver who lives his life by logic, order, and data. Facts are the only thing that never lie. People do. I learned that too late. 4 years ago I fell in love with a woman named Lena Morrison, a nurse with warm eyes, steady hands, and a voice that could calm even the worst panic attack. She had this way of making the world feel softer, safer, like she existed to patch up the jagged edges life kept trying to carve into me. We moved in together 2 years into the relationship, splitting bills, splitting chores, and splitting the kind of future people talk about in cozy coffee shops when they think nobody is listening. I genuinely believed I would marry her one day. We had routines, morning coffee together, Friday takeout nights, Saturday movie marathons. She used to rest her head on my chest and tell me that loving me felt like finally coming home. I believed every word she said. I shouldn't have. It started small, the kind of small that you dismiss because you want to believe you're imagining things. Lena became jumpy whenever her phone buzzed. She used to leave it on the couch or the counter, unlocked, without a second thought. Suddenly it became a second limb, glued to her palm every waking minute. She changed her passcode, too, claiming she needed better security at the hospital. I wanted to believe her, but a part of me felt a tiny pinprick of doubt, like the first drip of water before a dam breaks. Then came the gym obsession. Lena had always cared about fitness, but nothing extreme. But overnight she became someone who needed to go every day, sometimes twice, always late in the evening after work. She began wearing makeup to the gym, doing her hair, spritzing perfume even though she said she would sweat anyway. I tried to ignore it. She said she wanted to feel confident again. I told her she looked perfect no matter what. She smiled, but her eyes twitched with something I couldn't name. She also stopped inviting me to the gym with her. She used to love when I joined her, used to brag about having a built-in workout partner. But now whenever I asked she said she wanted alone time to clear her head. Then, 2 months into her new routine, she came home almost an hour later than she should have. She claimed she stayed longer to finish a hard cardio session, but she wasn't sweaty, her shirt smelled like a man's cologne, and she was oddly quiet, like someone had erased her personality and replaced it with a shaky, hollow version of her. The strangest part was her Apple Watch. She always wore it, but that night she set it down on the kitchen counter near the fruit bowl, something she had literally never done before. When she went to shower, the watch lit up with a notification about her exercise rings closing at 8:32 p.m. That made no sense. She'd walked in the door at 8:15. I picked up the watch, my pulse hammering in my ears, and stared at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. But they didn't. They stayed exactly as impossible as they were. My brain immediately went into detective mode. Lena wasn't at the gym. She wasn't anywhere she said she was. And the worst part? She didn't even cover her tracks carefully. It almost felt insulting, like she assumed I'd never check, never question, never dig deeper. That night I sat in the darkness of the living room, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the apartment. I opened my Apple ID, hands shaking slightly, and scrolled through the list of devices connected to the account. There it was, the old iPad I had given her years ago, the one she barely used anymore. Except apparently she used it just enough for it to stay signed in. I clicked Find My. A map appeared slowly, like it knew it was about to ruin my life and wanted to savor the moment. A blinking dot showed her device's most recent location. It wasn't the gym. Not even close. It was a residential street about 30 minutes from our place, a neighborhood she had no reason to visit. I zoomed in, heart pounding, throat tight. A single modern house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac. I searched the address online. Nothing familiar came up, no businesses, no families we knew, no connection to Lena. It was like staring at a black hole I was about to walk straight into. My chest ached. My hands hurt from clenching them too tightly. The reality of what this meant wrapped around me like ice water, but I still couldn't force myself to fully believe she was cheating. I needed to see it. I needed to witness it with my own eyes. So the next morning I pretended nothing was wrong. I made pancakes. I joked with her. She kissed me on the cheek and thanked me for breakfast, completely unaware that I knew something was horribly off. Her smile felt counterfeit, like a cheap replica of the real Lena I used to know. I told myself I had to be calm, collect evidence, think slowly. Panic would ruin everything. 3 days later, the chance came. She tied her shoes in the hallway, saying she was heading to the gym again for a late workout. My stomach twisted. I told her to have fun, forcing a smile I didn't feel. The second the door clicked shut, I opened Find My. The dot was already moving. I grabbed my keys. I followed her. And I had no idea that what I was about to see would not only confirm my worst fears but unravel a truth far darker than cheating alone. I drove with my hands locked so tightly on the steering wheel that my knuckles turned white, following the tiny moving dot on my screen like it was a predator leading me straight into its lair. My breath felt too loud in the car, my heartbeat felt like a hammer against my ribs, and the farther Lena's location moved from the route to her gym, the more I felt my world cracking open. She didn't even try to pretend anymore. She didn't even drive near the gym. Instead, she took the same exact route she had taken before, the same one I'd seen on the location history 2 nights earlier. I stayed far behind her, far enough that she wouldn't see my headlights in her mirrors. When she turned into the upscale suburban neighborhood again, my stomach dropped so hard I almost pulled over. But I forced myself to keep going, to follow, to witness. She slowed down in front of the same modern 2-story house from the map, and without hesitation she pulled into the driveway like she had been doing it for months. She didn't look around. She didn't check for neighbors. She simply parked, stepped out of the car, smoothed her hair in the window, and walked to the front door with familiarity that twisted a knife in my lungs. The door opened before she even knocked. A man stood there, taller than me, broad shoulders, wearing casual clothes like he had been waiting for her. Even from my spot halfway down the street, I saw the way she smiled up at him, the way he pulled her into his arms, the way their bodies fit together like they'd practiced. I felt something shatter inside me, a soundless but violent break. I had imagined cheating, suspected it, feared it. But seeing her melt into someone else's arms like she used to melt into mine, felt like being stabbed from the inside out. They went in together, the door closing behind them, and the house swallowed them whole. I couldn't breathe. I had followed her to get confirmation, but confirmation didn't feel like relief. It felt like drowning. I stayed parked there for several minutes, just staring at the house, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. I wanted to storm up to the door. I wanted to kick it open. I wanted to drag her outside and demand answers. But I didn't move. My brain, even through the fog of betrayal, told me I needed more than a scene. I needed a plan. If I confronted her now, she'd deny it, cry, twist the story, maybe even convince me I didn't see what I clearly saw. Narcissists and liars had that talent. So I forced myself to drive away, heart burning, chest tight, the image of her in another man's arms replaying on a loop so vivid I could barely see the road. When I got home, the apartment felt different. The air felt wrong. Her shoes by the door felt like evidence from a stranger's life, not ours. Her perfume still lingered in the hallway, and now it made me sick. I sat on the couch and stared at nothing for almost an hour, my thoughts spiraling in dizzy circles. I replayed every moment of the past few months, every excuse she made, every time she'd brushed me off, every sudden change she justified with flimsy explanations. It all made sense now. All the little shifts were puzzle pieces that formed a picture I never wanted to see. Around midnight, I checked her location again. She was still there. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I wondered what lie she'd bring home in the morning. Another late shift? Another gym night? Another I'm just tired? I barely slept. My mind churned through possibilities, what to say, how to confront her, whether she would admit it or deny until the end. But buried under the heartbreak was something worse. Something unsettling. Something I couldn't shake. When I'd watched her at the door earlier, she didn't seem nervous. She didn't act like someone sneaking around. She acted comfortable. Too comfortable. Like this wasn't new. Like this wasn't just cheating. Like it was something deeper. And the man at the house didn't seem like some random affair. He waited for her. He opened the door the moment she arrived. He touched her like he owned her. That thought sat in my stomach like a stone. When she walked into the apartment the next morning, she smelled like his cologne again. She tiptoed in quietly, hoping I was asleep. I pretended to be. She showered, slipped into bed, and wrapped her arm around me like she hadn't spent the night with another man. It took everything in me not to recoil. The next few days I acted like nothing was wrong. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I kissed her forehead. Inside, I was hollow. But I needed more information. I needed to know who he was and how long this had been happening. So every night I tracked her location. And every night she went back to the same house. She had built another life without me knowing. But the more I watched, the stranger things became. She didn't stay just an hour or two. She stayed entire nights. She sometimes left in scrubs she hadn't worn to our place. She kept a duffel bag in her trunk. She had a second toothbrush in that house. I saw it when she accidentally left the bathroom mirror selfie open on her phone one morning. Worst of all, I discovered something by accident that made everything colder. One night, after she left, I zoomed in on the location again. But instead of her dot stopping at the house like usual, it drifted behind the house. Deeper onto the property. Into what looked like a detached building. A private back structure. A guest house. Something she had never mentioned. Something hidden. Why would she go there sometimes instead of the main house? Why switch between the two? Curiosity twisted into dread. This wasn't just cheating. This was orchestrated. Routine. Structured. And then it got worse. Because after 2 weeks of tracking her, I caught something on the map I wasn't supposed to see. Something that didn't fit. Something that shouldn't have been possible. At 2:17 a.m., her device appeared at 2 locations, both the main house and the guest house, at the exact same time. 2 separate dots. 2 signals. One labeled with her device. One labeled with a second device I didn't recognize. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't just dealing with infidelity. I was dealing with something much bigger. Something carefully hidden. Something that involved more than one man. And something Lena had been lying about long before she ever set foot in that house. The night I saw 2 location dots tied to Lena's devices, something inside me shifted from heartbreak to a cold, methodical focus I didn't know I was capable of. Cheating was one thing. Betrayal was one thing. But 2 separate devices linked to her Apple ID appearing in 2 different spots on the same property at the same time meant she was running something much more complicated than an affair. It meant she had electronics I didn't know about. It meant she had been hiding parts of her life long before she started lying about the gym. It meant she wasn't just cheating, she was living a double life. The second dot stayed only a few minutes before disappearing from the map entirely, like the device had been turned off or destroyed. I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen, my heart thudding like a drum inside my skull. Why would she have a second device? Who else had access to it? Why did it only show up sometimes? I needed answers, and I was done waiting for them to reveal themselves. The next day, I worked from home, pretending everything was normal while studying the address I had followed her to. The property was owned by someone named Marcus Hale, a name I had never heard from Lena, not once in 4 years. A man in his late 30s, single, no public social media, the kind of person who seemed to exist just under the surface of public records. Too clean. Too curated. People like that always had something to hide. That evening when Lena came home from her shift, she was cheerful, humming while cooking dinner, acting like her life wasn't built on lies stitched together by routine. I watched her closely, trying to see if she carried guilt, fear, hesitation, anything that might show she knew her double life was at risk. But she looked relaxed. A little too relaxed. That worried me more than anything. Cheaters usually showed signs. Nervousness. Paranoia. But Lena moved like someone confident she would never be caught. Confident I would never look. Confident she had systems in place that protected her secrets. That night she didn't go to the gym. She stayed home instead, scrolling on her phone and smiling at something I couldn't see. I watched every movement she made, trying to catch any glimpse of the second device. I saw nothing. No extra phone. No tablet. No clues. She was careful. She had built a system with intention. The next day she went to the gym again, or so she said, so I tracked her. She went straight back to Marcus's house. This time, though, I didn't stop at watching from the car. I parked several streets away, walked the long way around the block, and approached the house from the back. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where people watered their lawns and waved politely without ever knowing the darkest secrets of their neighbors. I slipped between two houses, staying in the shadows, and when I reached the edge of Marcus's backyard, I saw the detached building clearly for the first time. A small studio-like structure behind the main house, built like a guest house but reinforced with thick, tinted windows and a keypad lock on the door. Lena's device was inside that building. The main house lights were on too, meaning she wasn't alone. I crouched near the fence, heart pounding, watching silhouettes move through the blinds of the main house. One silhouette was clearly Lena. The other was taller, broader, Marcus. I watched her lean into him. I watched him lift her chin with his hand. I felt fury bubble in my chest but forced myself not to make a sound. Then, a third silhouette moved across the back window of the guest house. Not Lena. Not Marcus. Someone else. Who the hell was inside that guest house? At that moment everything in me screamed that I needed to know what was happening inside that building. It was connected to Lena somehow. Connected to the second device. Connected to whatever she had been hiding. I waited until the lights in the guest house went dark. Then I slipped closer, careful not to draw attention. The door had a keypad lock, and I memorized every button Lena touched in the past few weeks, every pattern she used on her phone, every code she habitually tapped. Lena had repetitive habits. She trusted muscle memory more than thought. So I tried the code she used for her old phone years ago, 6342. The lock blinked red. Wrong. I tried the birthdate of her late father, which she used on her laptop, 1107. Wrong again. My hand shook as I tried 0728, her own birthday. The keypad flickered green. The lock clicked. The door creaked open. I slipped inside. The air smelled sterile, clean, and cold, nothing like a cozy guest house. It felt like a workspace, not a living space. A desk. A lamp. Shelves with organized folders. A small makeshift bed on the side. And then, on the desk, I saw something that froze my blood. A phone. One I had never seen before. A second iPhone logged into her Apple ID. A phone she had tried to hide from me for God knows how long. I lifted it and turned it over in my hand. No passcode. It unlocked instantly. That alone told me this phone was for temporary use. Disposable. Hidden. A burner phone with her Apple ID attached only when she needed to use it. My chest tightened as I scrolled through it. Dozens of messages. Dozens of calls. All from the same number. The contact was saved as M. Marcus. Their conversations weren't romantic. They weren't sweet. They weren't affectionate. They were tactical. They talked about schedules. They talked about timing. They talked about money. They talked about moving things at night. They talked about keeping me unaware. Then I saw something that made my hands go numb. A message from Marcus sent 2 nights ago. He's starting to notice. Make sure you stay ahead of him. I felt the room tilt as nausea punched through me. She wasn't just cheating. She was strategizing against me. Hiding operations. Hiding a life built around secrecy. And then I saw a folder in her Notes app titled List. When I opened it, I expected receipts of the affair. But what I saw instead was far worse. A list of names, dates, amounts of money, locations, people I didn't recognize. And at the very bottom, underlined 3 times, was my name. Next to it, final step, soon. My hands trembled uncontrollably. Final step? What step? What plan? What was she preparing to do to me? And why was my name in a list of strangers tied to money, dates, and something that looked uncomfortably like a ledger? As I stood frozen in that cold, quiet room, trying to process the truth, I suddenly heard footsteps crunching outside the door. Slow. Heavy. Getting closer. Someone had seen the green light on the keypad. Someone knew I was inside. The doorknob began to turn. I had seconds. Maybe less. And for the first time since discovering her betrayal, I realized the situation wasn't just emotional. It was dangerous. Deadly dangerous. Lena wasn't the woman I thought she was. She wasn't even close. And the moment that door swung open, I was going to find out exactly what she and Marcus were truly capable of. The door handle turned so slowly that every second felt stretched to the point of snapping, and for one brief, terrifying moment I was convinced my heart stopped altogether. I didn't have time to hide, not properly, only enough to slide behind a tall metal shelf stacked with binders and hope the shadows would swallow me. The door creaked open, letting in a sliver of dim light from outside, and I held my breath so hard my chest ached. Heavy footsteps entered the room, measured, cautious, deliberate. Not Marcus. His gait was heavier, more confident. This was someone smaller, lighter, moving with a sort of precise hesitation, like they were listening for something. Then I realized with a shock that rattled through me that the footsteps sounded familiar. They sounded like Lena's. Her silhouette moved across the room, blocking the faint light for a moment, and she let out a frustrated sigh as she checked the desk where the burner phone had been sitting just moments earlier. I still had it in my hand, but I clutched it against my chest to muffle any potential noise. She muttered something under her breath that I couldn't make out, but her tone was sharp, irritated, and not at all like the sweet, gentle voice she used at home. She was someone else entirely inside these walls, someone colder, calculated, and frighteningly comfortable in this secret life she had stitched together piece by piece. She checked the shelves next, her hand brushing dangerously close to the very one I hid behind, and for a split second I thought her gaze landed directly on me. I forced myself not to blink. The air felt like it was thick enough to choke on. She stayed in the room for another tense minute, pacing back and forth, typing something quickly on her main phone, probably messaging Marcus about the unlocked door or the missing device. Then, with another frustrated exhale, she stepped back toward the entrance, her silhouette retreating until the door slowly clicked shut behind her. I didn't move for a full 30 seconds, terrified she might still be outside listening. When I finally crept out from behind the shelf, my hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped the burner phone. I had to leave. Now. Before one of them came back. I slipped out through the door and into the cool night air, hugging the shadows as I navigated the side yard and eventually climbed over the back fence. My heart didn't stop slamming against my ribs until I reached the street 2 blocks away. I didn't go home right away. If they realized the phone was missing, the first place they'd suspect would be the apartment. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour grocery store parking lot and sat in the backseat of my car with the burner phone glowing like a radioactive object in my hand, taunting me with half-answers and dead ends. I scrolled through the list again, trying to make sense of the names, dates, and amounts. It looked like transactions, large ones, in the thousands, spread across weeks and months. Some names repeated. Some had check marks next to them. Some were crossed out entirely. And then there was mine. Ethan Carter. Final step, soon. The thought sent a cold ripple through me. What did final step mean? Was it personal? Financial? Physical? Had she planned something for me this whole time, even before the cheating started? A sudden realization chilled me. Lena had access to all my accounts. My passwords. My financial information. My work files. She knew everything about my life because I trusted her. I had given her keys to every part of my world, and now I had no idea which parts she had already cracked open behind my back. I needed more data, more clarity, something concrete that explained the operation she and Marcus were running. So I opened the hidden photo album on the burner phone. The images inside weren't intimate photos. They weren't romantic selfies. They were pictures of documents. ID cards. Checks. Bank statements belonging to names from the list. Screenshots of online transfers. Photos of people's mail. Pictures taken at odd angles as if in a hurry, some inside houses, others near mailboxes, others in what looked like office cubicles. Identity theft. Fraud. A whole operation. And Lena was in the middle of all of it. My stomach twisted violently. She wasn't just cheating. She was committing crimes. Serious ones. Federal ones. And dragging me toward the final step. Whatever that step was. My mind raced through possibilities. Using my identity. Framing me. Accessing my employer's secure systems through my credentials. Setting me up. Or worse. I couldn't go to the police yet. Not without understanding her endgame. Not without protecting myself. Not without proof that couldn't be twisted. And then the phone buzzed. A message. From Marcus. Did he take it? My blood froze. They knew. I needed to get rid of this phone. But before I powered it off, one more message came through. If he did, we move forward sooner. I nearly dropped the phone as panic clawed through me. Move forward sooner? What were they planning? I shoved the device into the glove box and started the car, driving aimlessly until my breathing slowed. I didn't go home until dawn. Lena was asleep in bed, curled up peacefully like the past night had been normal for her. I watched her for a long moment, studying her face, searching for the woman I fell in love with. She wasn't there anymore. Someone else lived behind those eyes now. Someone who could smile at me while planning God knows what. Someone who would betray me, lie to me, and walk straight into the arms and crimes of another man. I needed a plan. Something smarter than hers. Something she wouldn't anticipate. So I pretended everything was normal. I made breakfast. I kissed her cheek. I asked about her shift. But while she talked, I memorized every expression, every tone, every lie rolling smoothly off her tongue. And when she left for work, I went to a lawyer. Not for divorce. For protection. I explained just enough without naming her. The lawyer told me to secure my accounts immediately, freeze credit, lock everything down. They also told me something that made my blood run cold. If my name was linked to a list of fraudulent transactions, Lena could be preparing to use my identity as a fall guy when the operation collapsed. Final step suddenly made horrifying sense. They were going to pin it on me. Let me go down while they vanished. I drove home shaking. Lena hadn't just cheated. She hadn't just lied. She had planned to destroy my life. And that night, when she casually said she might go to the gym again, all I felt was cold determination settling into place. I wasn't going to wait for her final step. I was going to expose everything before she executed it. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Lena and Marcus were already one step ahead of me. And by the time I realized it, it was almost too late to stop what they had planned for me. I spent the next morning sitting in my apartment, still processing everything, while my phone buzzed nonstop with messages from people I barely remembered existed but who now suddenly wanted to check on me after the breakup became gossip-level public. I didn't respond to anyone. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed replaying every moment with Clara, wondering how much of it had been real and how much had been a script she'd memorized, performed, and discarded when it no longer served her. The anger I'd felt earlier had dulled into something heavier, an almost physical tiredness I couldn't shake off no matter how hard I tried. But life doesn't pause just because your heart feels like it's been slammed through a paper shredder. Work still expected me to show up, bills still needed to be paid, and the world kept spinning even though mine had cracked in half. I got dressed, forcing myself into some semblance of normal, and drove to work with the kind of autopilot mindlessness that made the ride feel both 5 minutes and 5 hours long. When I stepped inside, coworkers looked at me with a mix of awkward sympathy and thinly veiled curiosity, like they expected me to break down and cry at my desk. I didn't. I dove into work with tunnel vision, trying to crowd out thoughts of Clara, until around noon my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it at first, but it called again, and something in my gut told me to answer. When I finally picked up, the voice on the other end introduced himself as Detective Harris from the local police department, and instantly my stomach tightened into a hard knot. He said my name had come up in a report that morning, and before I could even begin to panic about what that might mean, he clarified that it was related to an altercation near the marina involving two individuals, one of whom was identified as Greg. My mind jolted, heart thrown into a frantic pace. The detective explained that someone had allegedly attempted to steal Greg's car after a domestic dispute, and witnesses had given conflicting statements about whether the woman involved had been abducted or willingly left with another man. I stood frozen in the hallway at work, the fluorescent lights suddenly feeling too bright, too sharp, while my mind tried to assemble the chaotic pieces of what I was hearing. I asked the detective if Clara was involved, and he said her name had indeed been mentioned, though she wasn't present when officers arrived. The only thing they found was Greg's car door hanging open, his keys on the ground, and blood smeared across the handle, though not enough to confirm anything more than a possible struggle. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not because I was worried about Clara, but because this situation felt like a thread unraveling far beyond what I thought this mess could ever become. When I hung up, I left work without even pretending I was coming back, replaying the detective's words like a looping siren. Something about this didn't feel like random chaos. It felt like the continuation of consequences Clara had set in motion long before last night's fight. And I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, despite being done with her, I was still tethered to the fallout. I drove to the marina, finding yellow police tape fluttering against the breeze, officers milling around, and a crowd of onlookers hunched over their phones, undoubtedly already uploading images and theories online. I didn't cross the tape, but I watched as officers combed the ground, taking photos of skid marks leading toward the back road that curved around the water, where tire tracks abruptly disappeared into the mud. A tow truck stood by with Greg's damaged car, the driver's window shattered clean through. An officer approached me young, sharp-eyed, and clearly exhausted. When I confirmed my identity, he asked if I knew either party's recent whereabouts or if Clara had ever mentioned threats from anyone. I almost laughed because the irony was too bitter to swallow. She had been the threat. But I kept my answers factual, careful, not wanting to get pulled into a deeper web than necessary. The officer nodded slowly as I spoke, jotting notes, and at one point he asked if I knew whether Clara might have fled intentionally. The word fled hit me like ice water down my spine, because suddenly the pieces clicked into place. Clara wasn't just escaping responsibility, she was running from something she'd done, something bigger than cheating, bigger than betrayal, something she didn't want anyone, least of all me, to know. And Greg, fool that he was, had gotten himself tangled right in it. When I got home hours later, drained to my bones, I found an envelope taped to my apartment door. No name, no address. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper with a message scribbled in Clara's rushed handwriting. I know you think you've won. But you don't know everything. You never did. I'm leaving because it's safer this way. Don't look for me. Don't get involved. This isn't about the cheating anymore. I'm sorry, in my own way. I read it 3 times, each attempt leaving me more unsettled than the last. She hadn't denied anything. She hadn't apologized for sleeping with Greg. She hadn't tried to salvage anything between us. Instead, she was hinting at something darker, something I had unknowingly brushed against when I tracked her location that night. Something that made her bolt. Something that involved Greg getting dragged into a parking lot incident and disappearing before officers could question him. And suddenly, the story I thought I was living, the story of a woman cheating and me finding out, felt like the surface layer of something far more dangerous. I didn't know where she went. I didn't know if Greg was alive. I didn't know whether she was running from someone or with someone. All I knew was that the moment I used my Apple ID to locate her, the moment I followed her into that cabin, the moment I confronted her, I had inserted myself into a chain reaction she had already set off elsewhere. And though I wanted closure, maybe even justice, I realized the smartest thing I could do was exactly what she wrote: not get involved. Because sometimes the truth isn't just painful, it's hazardous. In the weeks that followed, everything slowly returned to normal on the outside, but internally I was different. The detective called once to update me that Greg's car had been processed and nothing conclusive was found, and Clara was officially marked as voluntarily missing. After that, silence. I blocked her number even though it had been disconnected. I deleted her photos even though some memories still flickered through my mind like ghosts. And I moved forward, step by step, not because I forgave her, but because I refused to let her mistakes become the architecture of my future. I never found out what she was truly running from. I never heard from her again. But sometimes, when my phone pings unexpectedly at night, a small part of me wonders if she's still out there, checking my location the way I checked hers, only to make sure I stayed far, far away.